Joining me is Dr Michael Lawriwsky. He's an author, is a former academic, is a former chair of the Ukrainian Studies Foundation at Monash University, and a former trustee of Melbourne's Shrine of Remembrance. Michael, good to see you again. Donald Trump is sending his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, the worst diplomat in the world, to go see Putin on the weekend. Where is Trump's so-called peace push actually going?
Well, I think it's the problem is that Witkoff and the Americans don't understand what this war is all about. It's not about Russia gaining 20% of Ukrainian territory and Ukraine not being part of NATO. It's about destroying Ukraine completely, capturing Kyiv and effectively eliminating the Ukrainian people as a nation. That's what it's about. That's why there won't be a ceasefire from Russia. In fact, a couple of days before the Oval Office incident, we saw that Lavrov came out and said, look, it's against our constitution to actually cease fire because there are these cities of Kherson and Zaporizhia which are now under the control of Ukraine, but Russia thinks that they are part of Russia, and it's in their constitution that they can't cease fire until they get those. And that's the thing they put to Witkoff, and Witkoff has been saying, oh, it's all about these four regions where they voted to be with Russia. Well, that's just nonsense as well. These referenda were just a farce. So he's been spreading this disinformation about what the war is all about. There's no way that Putin is going to allow 900,000 or how many it is Russians to die, the amount of weapons that have been destroyed, etc., of Russia, and just walk away with 20% of Ukraine. What he wants to do is continue to attack Ukraine, and therefore the peace treaty that he wants would be one that keeps Ukraine defenceless and not able to reply to a new invasion by Russia. That's what it's all about.
Well, there may be a ceasefire, but I think it will only be so Putin can get America to walk away while it quickly rebuilds and then attacks again. That's all that'll be. Now, Trump's Vice President J.D. Vance says the US now could just walk away if it can't get peace. I just wonder, though, who actually does that threaten most? I mean, Ukraine would lose a major weapons supplier, of course. But then Russia might lose its best chance of getting what it couldn't take by war. And also the Europeans may step in, although obviously they need to really crank up their own weapons production.
Yes, the Europeans really do have to crank up. And that's one thing that has been good about this. But the thing is that the United States produces or provides something like 25 to 30% of Ukraine's weapons at the moment, but they are a very important 25 to 30%, and other countries are trying to substitute that. For example, the Japanese have announced that they're going to be providing satellite imagery. The Swedes are providing some AWAC planes that would be scanning the skies and that sort of thing, but they need Patriot missiles, and the Europeans have got $250 billion of frozen Russian assets, which they could really commandeer and provide to the Ukrainians so that they could buy the weapons from the Americans. However, we saw about a week ago that Mr. Trump said that he wouldn't even sell weapons to Ukraine. So it is really getting quite murky.
Now, there's one thing that the countries around Russia's border understand that Donald Trump does not. That is why Finland, which shares a long border with Russia, is now sowing the border with mines. It's why Sweden has announced it's going to build nuclear shelters for its people. It's why Latvia or Poland has increased its defence spending to an incredible 5%. They're all arming because they know what Trump doesn't, that if Russia does finally take over Ukraine, it gets Ukraine's army, and that's 600,000 people. It'll kill probably the officer corps or ship them off to prison or whatever, and it'll get Ukrainian weapons, and it will have an army ready right away for an invasion of whatever country it likes on its border. What do you make of that threat?
Well, I think it's very real. The German military has estimated that if Ukraine were to fall, Russia would be ready within 5 years to invade the rest of Europe. And probably the first countries to go would be the Baltic states, for example, where Lithuanians, for example, are now training in terms of evacuation personnel. They could snap them up pretty quickly. There's Moldova, and then there's Poland, which would be a harder nut to crack. However, when you look at the forces aligned, the Russians have in the field something like 220 brigades. Ukraine has about 110 brigades, and the whole of Europe combined only has 80 brigades. So this is a tactic that was used by the Mongol Golden Horde back in the Middle Ages, where they would invade a country and then they would use the people in that country as the first line of their next attack. And they have done that. They did that in World War II, the Russians. They also have done it more recently in eastern Ukraine, where they've captured those regions, those 5 regions of Ukraine, and they have conscripted those people and put them into meat assaults, leading to a very high casualty rate among those people. So yeah, they would definitely have by far the largest army in Europe in 5 years' time, potentially.
Well, people say, oh, well, you wouldn't attack a European country because NATO then, and they've got nuclear weapons. Wait a minute. Donald Trump is essentially walking away from NATO. He's got nuclear weapons. He wouldn't use them against Russia. And the only 2 countries are Britain and France who have nuclear weapons. Are they really going to use a nuclear weapon to defend Lithuania? I don't see that. And I think Russia doesn't see that. So they're so vulnerable. Michael Lawriwsky, thank you so much indeed for taking us through. Really, really appreciate it.